The story in Joshua 2 is one of the best stories throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. It's honestly kind of like a James Bond movie or even the Mission Impossible stories, but only Bible edition. Really, it has all the major elements. You've got the suspense, the high stakes, secret missions, and plenty of innuendo along the way. For as much as we human beings have changed, we love the same kind of stories. We pick up our story after Moses has died and Joshua has taken the reins of the Jewish people. They have reached the promised land. They are ready to cross the Jordan. But there's a slight problem. It's occupied. Way back in Deuteronomy 20, chapter 10, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 10 through 18, we see a very clear policy, a very clear law to remove anything non-Israelite from the community, to wipe out, essentially, all the non-Israelites that they encounter in the Promised Land. Why? Difference poses a threat. If we read Deuteronomy 20, 10 through 18, we see that they're afraid that if they commingle, if they cohabitate, if they live among people who are different, then they might lose their identity, that they may change. Difference poses a threat. If you live differently than me, you are a threat to me, because you may lead me astray, and my way is better too. It's an idea of conform or get out of the way. It's a familiar argument, one that our own nation used against native peoples, or really people of different cultures in general, or even in our modern societies we do with issues of sexuality and identity. We continue to try and get rid of those who think differently than us, who look differently than us, that pray differently than us, that love differently than us. Because if you live differently, you're a threat to me. You may lead me or my people astray, and my way is better. But this is a horrifically weak argument. If you are honestly worried that someone else's way of life is going to affect yours, then you are not at all comfortable in your way of life. This is about your insecurity and not the other person's immorality. We cannot play that game anymore. It doesn't work for us. But that doesn't help Joshua too much. They still have to invade, and before they cross the River Jordan, before they march around in a giant circle, tooting their own horn, so to speak, Joshua decides to send spies. I begin reading from the second chapter of Joshua, the 1st through 7th verses. Joshua, Nun's son, secretly sent 2 men as spies from Shittim. He said, "Go look over the land, especially Jericho." They set out and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab. They bedded down there. Someone told the king of Jericho, men from the Israelites have come here tonight to spy on the land." So the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, "Send out the men who came to you, the ones who came to your house, because they have come to spy on the entire land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, "Of course the men came to me, but I don't know where they were from. The men left when it was time to close the gate at dark, but I don't know where the men went. Hurry, chase after them. You might still catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hid them under the flax stacks that she had laid out on the roof. The men from Jericho chased after them in the direction of the Jordan up to the fords. As soon as those chasing them went out, the gate was shut behind them. These spies are clearly not very good at their job. Now, to be fair, these are folks who have no idea what they're doing, and they would have stuck out like a sore thumb. After all, they'd been living in the desert for the past 40 years. It would almost be like me on vacation. I mean, like me walking through an unfamiliar place, just looking and pointing and oohing and awing at all the weird and strange things I'm seeing for the first time. So the king learns of their presence immediately. He even knows that they went to Rahab. But Rahab decides to step in and to help. Who is Rahab? Before we even start to unpack who this woman is or why she does what she does, we need to check our 21st century judgments at the door right here, right now. Rahab is not immoral. She and her family are victims in this story. Rahab is at the bottom of society. She is a victim of society's injustices. She's living not only in the edge of the city, but within the cramped walls. Interestingly enough, when you go to a lot of old forts, even some Civil War forts are still built like this. They build two walls. One is your exterior wall that's nice and thick, and then about a foot to 2 foot gap, and then a second wall. So that if the first wall is hit and crumbles, it falls and gets caught on the second wall and it doesn't crumble. It's a very standard protection technique for many ancient cities and many modern, Civil War modern forts. Rahab and her family lived in the gap, on the very edge of the city, that was going to be the first place to be attacked, the first place to be bombarded, all but guaranteeing that she would be one of the first to die in the invasion, crushed as the outer wall fell. Likely, Rahab is also forced to sell herself to get out of family debt. Not only in this part of human history, but throughout human history, even into the modern day, people lived in debt slavery, forced to work for others until they are able to pay off their debt, forced to sell children and offspring until they can pay off their debt. And so we have this woman, Rahab, who's an outcast in her own society, doing all she can to help her family escape. All the while, she is judged and maligned as immoral, especially by us. But what other options does Rahab have to care for her family? In her day and age, not a one. But nevertheless, she persists. She continues to try and create a better life for herself and her family. And she sees an opportunity to escape this life for a better one. I want to be crystal clear. Rahab being a prostitute in this story has nothing, I repeat, has nothing to do with her ethics or her morality. This is not a sign of Rahab's immorality, but society's. This is a sign that society is immoral, that they would leave out people hanging on for dear life on the edge of the wall. This is an indictment on the society that would trap and enslave each other for personal gain and retribution. This is a sign of how society is immoral. And our judgment should be pointed towards the society that places Rahab and her family in this place. Our judgment should be pointed towards the society that creates injustice in the first place. And so Rahab, she saves these men. Why? Self-survival, to escape the hell that she's living in. Also to save herself from the Israelites that she has heard and that she fears. But also because she has a hope for a new and better life. And so she takes a chance. She welcomed the stranger, the foreigner in her midst, and took care of them. She outsmarted the king and his guards. And these spies have found an unlikely friend, a non-Jew, a woman who is not of the highest reputes. Why should the spies trust her? a woman from the very city that they intend to sack, a Canaanite whom they had been instructed and commanded to wipe out. And Rahab has found unlikely friends. And why should Rahab trust them? These are men who have come to sack and destroy her city, people the whole city fears. But in spite of their differences, they find a way to trust and rely on one another. Continuing our story in Joshua chapter 2, now with verses 8 through 14. Before the spies bedded down, Rahab went up to them on the roof. She said to the men, "I know the Lord has given you the land. Terror over you has overwhelmed us. The entire population of the land has melted down in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea in front of you when you left Egypt. We have also heard what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan. You utterly wiped them out. We heard this and our hearts turned to water. Because of you, people can no longer work up their courage. This is because the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now I have been loyal to you. So pledge to me by the Lord that you will in turn deal loyally with my family. Give me a sign of good faith. Spare the lives of my father, my mother, my brothers and sisters, along with everything they own. Rescue us from death." The men said to her, "We swear by our own lives to secure yours. If you don't reveal our mission, we will deal loyally and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land." Two important things in this part of the text. First, we see confirmed again why Rahab is helping these men. She's doing this for her family, and she's doing this because she has heard of the people and their power. But second, and most importantly, Rahab is the smartest character in this story, and she is the hero of this story. These spies are witless and dumb, and they nearly get caught and executed. The guards are fooled, but Rahab has got it all put together. And who would have expected her? No one. And yet, who does God call and equip? The outcast. Picking our story back up again from verses 15 to 21. So she lowered the spies on a rope through the window. Her house was on the outer side of the city wall, and she lived inside the wall. Then she said to them, "Go towards the highlands so that those chasing you don't run into you. Hide there for 3 days until those chasing you return, then you may go on your way." Then the men said to her, "We won't be responsible for this pledge you made us swear, unless when we come to the land you tie this red woven cord in the window through which you lowered us. Gather your father, your mother, your brothers, and your whole family in the house with you. Those who go outside the doors of your house into the street will only have themselves to blame for their own deaths. We won't be responsible. If anyone lays a hand on those who are with you in the house, we will take the blame for their death. But if you reveal our mission, we won't be responsible for the pledge that you made us swear." She said, "These things will happen just like you said." And she sent them away, and they went off. Then she tied the red cord in the window. Does the red cord in the window remind us of anything that's happened before in this Moses story? Like the red blood of the Paschal Lamb being painted over the doors of the faithful? The spies and Rahab, they make a vow to each other. And there are conditions. Their faith in each other is not blind. And they don't make promises that they can't keep. The spies and Rahab, they both had to be incredibly nervous. They couldn't be sure that either one of them was going to honor their promises. But they had no choice but to have faith in each other, to have faith in the enemy, to have faith in the stranger. And sometimes that means that we have to establish clear expectations and boundaries with one another. But it wasn't just the spies that had to trust Rahab anymore. It was the whole of the Israelites' army. And she didn't just have to trust the spies, but the whole of the Israelite army in turn. And trusting the stranger is no easy feat. But it is only in trusting the stranger that we can find friends. And sometimes we have to be willing to take that risk. And the truth is that sometimes we will get burned. But if we never take the risk, if we never reach out, what will we ever gain? Continuing with verse 22 to 24. The spies went out and entered the highlands. They stayed there for 3 days, till those chasing them came back. Those chasing them had searched all along the road, but never found them. The 2 men came back down from the highlands. They crossed the Jordan and came to Joshua, Nun's son. They told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, the Lord has definitely given the entire land into our power. In addition, all the land's population has melted down in fear because of us. They're in fear of the army and their God, not the spies. I just want to make sure we're clear about that. The spies were not scary. Because really, this isn't a spy story after all. Because honestly, the spies didn't accomplish a darn thing. They only ever saw Rahab's house and roof. They only spoke to one person, to Rahab. This is very clearly not a very effective intelligence gathering mission. But this story really isn't about the intelligence or about the spies. This story is about how hard it really is to judge one another and to condemn one another when we actually spend time getting to know the people that we judge and condemn. Here is this Canaanite woman whom you have known and trusted. You've heard her story and her challenges, and suddenly this kill or enslave all Canaanite things becomes a bit more complicated. It's kill and enslave all Canaanites except for this one. Now Canaanites are people too. And here are these Israelite spies who themselves are clueless, but their people are violent, yet they can be trusting and fair. And suddenly not all Israelites are so terrifying after all, and maybe, just maybe, Israelites are people too. These 3, they found friendship and trust in people that their society said that they should fear and condemn. Because it's easy to see people on the face, to make snap judgments, and it makes it that much easier to hate, despise, and revile if you don't actually know them. Think about a group of people that you don't like. I know you have one. Politics is easy, but maybe there's a particular generation of people you're not a big fan of. Maybe there's a sports team and their fan base. Do you really know anyone who's a part of that group? And I don't just mean like an acquaintance. I mean, have you ever had a sit-down, face-to-face conversation with that person? I have said it before, and I will say it again. I despise the I despise the Las Vegas Raiders. Old habits die hard. I despise the Las Vegas Raiders, and I am convinced that their fans are the embodiment of evil. But I've actually ever met a Raiders fan, sat down and talked to one, human to human? No, because then my theory will probably be disproven. One of the authors that I read for this week had a quote that really struck me. She wrote, in all of Israel's holy wars, how many Rahabs did they kill? How many people on the fringes of society? How many people yearning for something new, for something more? How many people who are yearning for belonging, to know and to be known? In all of Israel's holy wars, how many Rahabs did they kill? How many Rahabs have we left out? How many Rahabs have we judged and condemned? Who have we looked over and ignored? It's really the question for the Israelites who first heard this story and for you and I. Who has been left out? And how do we strive to include others in our future? But there's one last thing worth acknowledging in this story. Jesus is a descendant of Rahab. This Canaanite woman, this stranger, enemy, and foreigner. Imagine how much different our story may be if Rahab was indeed left to die in the walls of Jericho. The outcast and slave to the injustices of her day. What does that say about Jesus and his own ministry? My friends, we can be in each other's lives and stories if we only take the time to reach out. And no, it may not always work out. But God only knows the amazing places that we can go together. The legacy that we'll leave for those who come after us. If we only took the time to reach out to the stranger, to the enemy, to the foreigner. If we only took the time to reach out to those that we may judge and condemn, we may just find the most unlikely of friends. As we enter this time of self-reflection, I invite us to think about who might you have judged, who might you have condemned in society, and who might you have left out.